Head of Business Development over at Wicked Labs. Really appreciate everybody being here today. Enterprise blockchain is one of the most interesting topics to me in the space. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I'm excited to explore with Jazz and Jay here a little bit more about what those opportunities look like, what are some of the challenges that enterprise companies are facing with adoption of blockchain technology. And we'll keep this pretty free-flowing, see where it goes, and hope you guys enjoy the next 20 minutes. After this, we'll be hanging out, I guess, outside of this room, and able to take any questions if anybody has any questions or would like to talk to any of us further. So with that, I guess we'll start with you, and you can just introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about what Swisscom is doing.
Thanks, Alex. So Swisscom. Swisscom is essentially the national ICT and telecoms provider in Switzerland. And Swisscom Blockchain are a subsidiary of this company. And you might ask yourself, why does a telecom company want to find itself into the world of blockchain? Well, the very simple answer to this is if you start to look really, really deep into what telecom companies have always been doing, is essentially they've been managing and orchestrating communication effectively between businesses. So Swisscom's mission has been, Swisscom Blockchain's mission has been to try and facilitate the adoption of blockchain within the industry throughout our enterprise customers.
Great. My name is Chugh. I am head of blockchain products at Oracle. So Oracle, as you may know, is a large software company, primarily with strengths in the database technologies. That's where they got the prominence, and also managing world's data. The largest amount of data is stored on Oracle technologies, and also transactions. All of the world's transactions, the majority of them go through the ERP systems and other transactional systems that Oracle runs. So it was inevitable for us to think about blockchain when it first hit the scenes about 3-4 years ago. And we have an offering that we'll talk about in the cloud space, where we've made it simple for the enterprises to adopt blockchain. We'll talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is real world use cases. And the question I get a lot when I talk to enterprises about using blockchain technology in various industries is, why wouldn't I just use my centralized database? Why do I need to use blockchain? So it's kind of like, why at Oracle?
That's for me, I guess. So blockchain is a distributed ledger technology. It has the concept of being distributed. Why do you need distributed? Because you may have different parties whose economic incentives may not align. So they may not trust the database residing in somebody else's premises to make a collective business decision. So that's where the notion of this decentralized trust helps these collective companies. So the trust is enforced as a given, as part of the system. The second is it's distributed, so that means no one party could tamper with that evidence or that data. And also it's got the elements of resilience built into it. So all of these together, I think, make the businesses run smoother, run faster as they're trying to expand rapidly.
Yeah. And I think, Alex, so when we're talking about, this kind of big kind of question about centralized versus decentralized platforms, effectively in the enterprise world, we are dealing with people that come from sort of, maybe an evil word to use for it, legacy world, where people are running a business model, they've got something that they're operating which is functioning. So to rock up to them to say, hey, do you want to start investing into a blockchain, can be a little bit of a challenge. Blockchain is inherently expensive, complicated, and a bit of a trick, yeah? So the real kind of payoff in terms of trying to help promote blockchain technologies to customers is effectively initially to start educating them with the potential that blockchain can start bringing them. And one of the first things that we do, and it's always the hardest part of my job, is to rock up to a customer and to sort of help them identify a very, very firm financial business case. And the reason why we had to do that is because the minute someone starts to launch a blockchain idea, especially in a large corporate or enterprise environment, everyone's going to try to shoot them down. Yeah, it's going to be a bit of an expensive project. So by identifying a very kind of firm, concrete business case, it gives that opportunity a very kind of good longevity within the organization.
That makes 100% sense to me. I'd really love to explore that a little bit deeper, some specific use cases, specific examples. For example, one area where I see a lot of opportunities in the emerging world where governments aren't able to provide some of the basic services that businesses need to operate. One example is a company called Cell Labs, which is out of Nigeria. And they're bringing transparency to the flow of money for social impact investing, but it really could be used for any flow of capital throughout Africa. So for example, you've got a big oil spill in Nigeria that needs to be cleaned up, and Exxon needs to put $100 million into that. A lot of times, 80% of that gets lost in corruption. And the same thing applies for things like deeds and land ownership all throughout Africa. How do you track that? How do you make sure that's not just flow of money, that's actual ownership of the assets that gets tracked in blockchain? So I'd love to, and I think these things are going to take off in those markets because there's a big gap void to be filled, a big pain point. So what are you guys seeing? Where's the pain points that these enterprises are having that are kind of specific and real business use cases?
So I'll start. We're seeing a lot of traction in the Asia Pacific markets as well as Europe. And North America is still ramping up to this, and there are a lot of production uses in the emerging markets. So for example, you mentioned Africa. We have a couple of paying customers there who are using blockchain to track the provenance of minerals right from the mines to the point that they are utilized for, say, jewelry. There's a mining company out of Rwanda that's a customer of ours called Circular that does that. And out of China, we recently announced a company called Seku, which is a luxury e-commerce goods company. For example, if you're buying a Gucci bag, you want to know that that was an authentic Gucci bag from the right manufacturers who are authorized to manufacture them. So they're tracking that over Oracle blockchain. And then there are other companies in loyalty points. So for example, if you have airline miles, you want to use them in a different context, say buy stuff off of Amazon or eBay. You could do that now with the power of blockchain to transfer the value from one network to the other, and people are doing that over our Oracle blockchain. So those are some examples.
Cool. So Swisscom's actively kind of very present in sectors from government, pharma, banking, and industry. What we've kind of noticed is that, like some of the points that you mentioned, Jay, it's like markets such as Asia, Africa, even South America, when you go up to them talking about a case such as, say, remittance, banking, cross-border payments, in Africa, this might cost something like $100 to settle. So a case for a blockchain suddenly becomes a bit easier to position and start promoting it for those cases. And at Swisscom, we're actually doing a lot of business within the Middle East, Africa, and Asia as well. And on the flip side, this is probably the depressing side sometimes, the same banks are a lot more reluctant to work on similar products within Europe, US, and so on. Yeah? So this is one of the big challenges of enterprise. How do you start trying to, how do you start promoting the concepts that actually make a lot of sense to people that don't have a pain point that is big enough yet?
Yeah, so that's a timing issue. And I think another part of enterprise blockchain that I'm really interested in is discovering these business models that actually are supported by solving a real pain point. So I'd love to, Jay, pick your brain about that with Oracle and the business model that you guys have behind. Whatever you're able to share, I'm not really sure how much you can share about that, but the business model of Oracle with the blockchain, is it an open blockchain or open source or what? tell us more about that.
Sure. When we are talking to enterprises, a lot of the time we're trying to say, is blockchain right for you? And we are trying to be their strategic advisor to help them guide through, do you need a relational database versus a distributed database like a Cassandra or MongoDB? Is that a good enough for you? Or blockchain? So once we get through that, use the right tool for the right job. I think the next step is picking the right technology stack. There are plenty of choices. They get flooded with vendors out there who are saying, use our blockchain, Quorum, R3 Corda, and Hyperledger based, as well as Ethereum. So which one should an enterprise go with? So our blockchain is based on the notion that you as an enterprise do not need to worry about the dynamic nature of the open source technologies. They are quite brittle if you were to manage and monitor them yourself. So we take that pain out and make it a fully managed cloud service so that you simply subscribe to that service and set up your blockchain network, invite your partners and suppliers to join that network and transact business right on first brush with the technology. So all the grunt work of backup, security, identity management, and container management, all those infrastructure related tasks are relegated to the experts at Oracle that do that for you. And it's a simple pricing model on pay per use. So that also aligns very well because a lot of enterprises can't figure out what the demand might be for blockchain. So we want to align with their business model going forward. So we are based off of Hyperledger technology, which was the most stable, we thought, for the enterprise use case. It's an open source technology run by the Linux Foundation. And we thought that was a good baseline to build intellectual property on top of to help our enterprise customers.
That's interesting, and I think this is where we get to the point of the panel, part of the panel where we have some controversy and strong opinions around open source versus closed source and managed and consortium models and open blockchains and permissions and whatnot. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. I mean, I've been seeing several businesses get built on top of managing nodes, Ethereum nodes and Aeon nodes and stuff like that for enterprise clients building dApps and things like that. So what are your thoughts on some of the stuff that Jay brought up?
So the first thing, being a Swiss, I have to say we remain completely agnostic and neutral. So I think when trying to figure out what blockchain anyone needs, it's always about what are they going to use it for. We've got at Swisscom, we actually got a Hyperledger factory as well, but we're also doing a lot of work with Corda, Ethereum, Tron, and Neo, and so on, and even like IOTA and so on. What we kind of find is that usually blockchains can be clustered up into different families, and they seem to have a general applicability to a certain area. So for example, anything with IoT is voila, everyone loves IOTA. Everything to do with sort of banking, people start drifting towards Hyperledger or Corda and so on. Right? If you're asking me if I actually have a bit of a favorite, I sort of think that it's a dangerous question for me to answer.
You don't have to answer it. Maybe that's a question that anyone here can ask him offline after the talk.
So we know he lives in Switzerland because he's completely neutral.
But in respect, a lot of the customers are moving towards Hyperledger, and I think there are a lot of new things also emerging that will probably hit the scene in 2019. So what we're actually seeing at the moment is sort of new distributed technologies emerge in the space of confidential computing or secure multi-party computing, whereby people are sort of like trying to take the paradigm of blockchain and drive it further in terms of security, privacy, and all of those good things.
So another thing that I think, so we've so far been circling around business models and use cases that an enterprise might pay a central company to help them with. And I think there's lots of services that will be built on top of these existing blockchains, like like Ethereum, one of the use cases I really love are data markets. It's something I'm really interested in, is the de-siloing of data and creating incentives for people to contribute really valuable data and monetize their data on an individual level. So some companies I'm really excited about in that space are Regen Network. They're creating an open and incentivized data market for ecological data and services from farmers. So trying to reverse climate change. Ocean Protocol, which is open source and focused on building token curated registries. You guys can Google that if you haven't heard of what they are, but it's a really interesting token economic structure for incentivizing data contribution. So how do you think these kinds of data markets will impact enterprise? How will they be used? What kind of problems do you think they solve, if you thought about that?
Yeah, I'll share a quick anecdote. We have a customer out of North America. They've built an incentive structure for sharing your solar. If you're producing solar off of your rooftops, you can share the excess capacity with the network. And why should anyone who's generating that much energy store? So they're giving credits back that they can utilize to spend elsewhere. So there are newer business models to drive the right behavior in areas where, such as voluntary work or these renewable clean energy sources. So we're seeing a little bit of that happen.
Do you have any, like that? We gotta wrap up here in a second, but maybe one more answer.
There's just very kind of similar cases, that it's like machine to machine. We recently did a project in the energy management space for wastewater facilities. And a very, very kind of similar concept, whereby essentially we want to be able to start doing analytics and sharing the findings.
Yeah, the energy space, and we'll wrap up here, guys. Thank you so much. The energy space is another really interesting opportunity, especially for data. There's a company called Switch that you guys should look up, switch.io, that's doing some cool work there. But thank you so much for talking about enterprise blockchain with us. And if you guys have questions, we'll be outside and happy to chat with anyone here. Thanks so much. Thank you,